Hello, people of Parkinson Support Group of Sonoma County. Welcome. This month's speaker, Dr. Daniel Corcos. Dr. Corcos obtained his PhD in 1982 in motor control from the University of Oregon. He completed a postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Neurosurgery at Rush Medical Center in 1987. Dr. Corcos was on faculty at the University of Illinois at Chicago from 1987 to 2014 and joined the faculty of the Feinberg School of Medicine at Northwestern University in 2014. He has published more than 220 peer-reviewed research articles, and his research has been cited more than 16,000 times. He has an H index of 71. The National Institutes of Health, NIH, has continuously funded his research since 1986 and has been awarded close to $50 million in grant funding. The goal of the research of Dr. Corcos is to integrate neuroscience and clinical trials to investigate exercise interventions to help people with Parkinson's disease improve their quality of life, mobility, and cognition, and slow down the rate of disease progression. His current research, recently published in the Journal of American Medical Association Neurology, suggests that a high-intensity endurance might slow down the rate at which Parkinson's disease progresses. These findings have been covered in the New York Times and the general press worldwide. Dr. Corcos lectures nationally and internationally to physicians, neuroscientists, and patients on the benefits of exercise for those with Parkinson's disease. He is currently the PI of a follow-up phase 3 clinical trial on endurance exercise, SPAR-X3, which was recently covered by the Washington Post. He gives approximately 10 invited talks a year. He has been invited to speak to patient groups with Parkinson's disease in Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Iowa, Louisiana, Minnesota, California, Virginia, and Ohio. He has made presentations to the American Parkinson's Disease Association, the Davis Phinney Foundation, and has worked closely with the Parkinson's Foundation to develop exercise guidelines for people with Parkinson's disease. We welcome you, Dr. Corcos. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Tess, for that very kind introduction. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a real pleasure and honor to be able to talk to the Parkinson's Support Group of Sonoma County. What you will see on my slide here, this gentleman has had lots of publicity, and he was very young onset diagnosed at the age of 28. And he did very well on Ninja Warrior. And what I am acutely aware of, even if I can't see you all on Zoom, and if I can't see you all in the church, you're at different ages, different stages of the disease. Not everything I say might apply to you exactly at this point in time, but I'm happy in questions to see how we can adapt any of my comments depending on what stage you are. Because clearly here we have a person early on in the disease whose posture balance is very good. They're not falling a lot. And here we have somebody much, much further along in the disease. And I'm happy to take questions from you at whatever stage of the disease you are. Now, we've known since the time of the Greeks, actually we've known beforehand, you can go back 6,000 years and look at the wonderful writings in India, that exercise is very good for you. And here we have Plato and Aristotle. Lack of activity destroys the good condition of every human being, while movement and methodical physical exercise save and preserve it. But 12, 13 years ago, I went to NIH to propose the study which was referred to earlier, published in 2018. And the program officer there simply said, well, it's just exercise. Why do we need to study exercise? Well, we need to study it for several reasons. One of which is we need to try to understand how it works so well. But the part that I'm really interested in is providing very compelling evidence so that physicians physical therapists, nurses can really give people who have the disease a very clear exercise prescription. And that's my goal. But Oscar Wilde is not alone when he wrote, "To get back my youth, I would do anything in the world, anything, except take exercise, get up early, or be respectable." And I am acutely aware that Parkinson's disease is a disease with apathy, depression, anxiety, and exercising isn't always easy for people. And sometimes they need help and support, which is why your support group is so terrific. And it's why support groups throughout the world are so terrific in helping people. And so the idea is to find ways to help people get and stay motivated to move, because it's a movement disorder, and the best way to help a movement disorder is to move. Now, what you should learn at the end of my lecture is it is really important to do weight training. Most people don't realize this, but I'm going to make it crystal clear that everybody, even if you're in a wheelchair, you can get resistance bands, you can get 1 pound dumbbells. There are all kinds of ways you can apply a little load to your muscle. And that little load to your muscle does an immense amount of good. Endurance training is very good. The idea here is to get your heart elevated. As the disease progresses, balance becomes a problem. And as I kind of alluded to when I spoke to you earlier, the exercise prescription, this is true for Parkinson's disease. It's needed at all stages. I understand full well the amount of modification it needs as one gets older and the disease progresses. But one still needs to have a clear vision that activity is better than no activity. So let me tell you what you know, okay? And that is, what is the problem? Well, the problem is progression of disability. So here we have time, and here we have how disabled a person is. And then finally, at the end, all of us die. I think it's very important for me to let you know, because a lot of people get confused here. The life expectancy of people with Parkinson's disease is no different to other people. So this is not a disease which cuts off life prematurely, for example. So as you all, for those of you who have the disease, you all know that for a period of time before the disease, you may have figured something was wrong, okay? And so here we have sleep disturbance, depression, constipation, altered heart rate metrics, anxiety, loss of sleep. And this is the prodromal phase, and you'll be reading around the literature. There's a huge effort being made to identify people before they get the disease so that they can help shift over the onset. You're diagnosed on slowness of movement, bradykinesia, and then you will have rigidity and or tremor. These are the so-called cardinal signs of the disease. And then as the disease progresses, you may get weaker. Chronotropic incompetence is just a fancy way of saying the heart may not scale to do the tasks that you want. Your VO2 may drop, and one can have swallowing. And then you have the falls, postural instability. And then on this axis, some of you will certainly have orthostatic hypertension. The idea here is when you stand out of a chair, you may get a little bit dizzy. And a group of people do end up with dementia. And this progression is well known. And so the idea is, can we slow it? And by the way, this is not unique to Parkinson's disease. This is unique to everybody. So for those of you who are caregivers, we all want to slow the rates at which we age. So these principles are true for absolutely everybody. It becomes a little bit more salient for people with Parkinson's disease because your disability progresses a little bit more quickly than an elderly person would. And so the question, this is the problem. It's a well-known problem. What is the solution? Well, here is the solution. And what I want you to see, here we have people with resistance. This is cardio on a rowing machine. Here we have Tai Chi or some form of exercise. And I have to tell you, for those of you in Sonoma County, I would have no trouble motivating myself to go and do a little bit of exercise in your marvelous redwood trees. I mean, you live in just a wonderful, wonderful part of the world. And taking a walk through the Alexander Valley can only be a good thing. So you have a lot going for you where you live. And I'm going to push a message at the end of why it's important to do quite serious exercise. But I am very much aware that this is not everybody's cup of tea. Or if you like, it's not everybody's vintage glass of red wine from the Alexander Valley. And at the end of the day, just like some like Pinot Noir, you have to find what works for you. But I'm going to leave you a very strong evidence of where the science takes you. And then there's also a question of where you take yourself. And you have to find that happy intermediate ground. So all of this is very good for you. Focused breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, meditating can only make your rigidity better. So for those of you who really don't like getting your heart rate up, this level is very good for rigidity. It's also very good to know about stretching, slow walking, yoga, especially the focused breathing, muscle relaxation, because some of you who work out quite hard, who have tremor, will find their tremor exacerbated during and after the workout. It's a response to the hormones circulating in your system. And at some point, one can just reduce this. And so the resting level here is also very good for those who work out very hard. And then you move up the intensity. And if you really want to slow the rate of disease progression, the evidence for high intensity rowing, cycling, running, walking is crystal clear. And I'm going to show it to you. So my two favorite activities in life are talking to people such as you and talking to my Doctor of Physical Therapy students, because my goal is to teach them state-of-the-art research, and then they will be working with people just like all of you. I asked them in my class, how many of you do resistance training? About 60, 70%. I tell them, you should all be doing it. And my final word to them is, if it's good enough for the squirrel, it should be good enough for you. And I'm going to push this very hard, but just remember this super active squirrel and that you should be doing weight training. And now let me give you the evidence for it, because most of you won't be doing it, but it's good for you. The hardest thing about doing research is finding a control group. One needs a control group to compare one's new treatment to. The less one does in a control group, the bigger difference you will have between a new treatment. But because exercise is so good, we need to have two good treatments compared. This dot shows that over 2 years, when you measure the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Score, for those of you, when you go see your movement disorder specialist, he or she will have you tap your fingers, they'll have you pronate, supinate, they'll have you move your leg up and down, they will pull you from behind. They sum these scores all up, and it comes to a number. For those who are just, oh, I'm sorry, hang on. You will come to a number. And so over 2 years, people get about 6, 7, 8 points worse. One of my interventions was called Fitness Counts. And as you can see, after 6 months, this is a change from baseline score. These people were 7 points better off. And then by 2 years, they got back to where they were at baseline. But remember, that's after 2 years. This group did really serious weight training. They did 11 lots of exercise. They did exercises like squats and bench press and lifting weight overhead, triceps extension, etc. They did 3 lots of 10 exercises. And at the end, they were 13 points better off. And the people in the study really said that they benefited from it. And resistance exercise, and I'm pushing this really quite hard, is important because not only does it affect muscle, and as you get older, you can become frail, and frailty is the next step before death. It's very, very good for bone. And people with Parkinson's disease have a much higher probability of having osteoporosis. And therefore, when they fall, they have a much higher probability of a fracture. And the best way to deal with that is to do resistance exercise. Now, what most people don't realize, and it's a little bit hard to understand, but it's true, when you work your muscle, you're also working your brain. You're working lots of neurotransmitters in your brain, and you're working lots of circuits in your brain. All I want you to see is there are 3 scores here. This is the digit span. So imagine trying to remember numbers. I think some of you, when you go and see your physician, they may have you count back in 7s from 1,000, or have you remember numbers or something like that. But here, this is remembering numbers. There are also tests to see how learning one task interferes with another task. And so this is called the Stroop color word interference test. And here we have the brief test of attention. How well you attend. 12 months, 24 months. Both groups, modified fitness counts, progressive resistance exercise training, they're still both above the 0 point. This means that over 2 years, cognition has either stayed the same or very slightly improved. You'll find that resistance training has been shown to help in Alzheimer's disease, in healthy aging. It's a very, very potent way. And for many people, it is the declining cognition which perhaps motivates them most to continue to exercise. It's certainly in the back of my mind. I'm probably older than several people on this call. And it certainly motivates me when I go into the gym, because I happen to have the kind of job that as soon as my cognition starts to decline, my good friend in Southern California, Lou, will send me an email which says, Daniel, time to call it quits. So motivating oneself for cognition is a good thing to do. Now, here we have 5 exercises. And what happens when you do this exercise here? You don't need a very big weight. You're trying to go up and down you're trying to use your quadriceps muscles. And this is very good because a lot of people, as they get older and older, can't get out of chairs. One needs to use one's hands, so one needs special chairs. And so keeping quadriceps strength high is very good. And what happens is because you have a little bit of wobble here and a little bit of wobble here, you've got information from your receptors here going all the way up to the brain. And then the brain is sending signals all the way back down your spinal cord, out to your muscles. So you're also helping your control of movement, your balance. At the same time, you're getting stronger. But the most remarkable finding of all is this, and I just want you to focus over here. This is resistance training instability group. Resistance training instability group. Many of them had a score on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment below 26, which makes them mildly cognitively impaired. 40% plus of people with Parkinson's disease have mild cognitive impairment. They did this 12-week program, and most of them now, their mild cognitive impairment had gone. So the take-home message for the first part of the talk is do resistance exercise because frailty, which is basically loss of muscle mass and loss of the ability to contract muscle, osteoporosis, cognition can all be improved. And the evidence for this is crystal clear. Why do endurance exercise? Well, here you have a brain. And what does the brain need? It needs oxygen and nutrients because it has neurons, and for the neurons to work well and not die, it needs a very good blood circulation. As one ages and as one has disease, that you have reduced blood circulation. And this is very, very clear and very obvious when you look at the recent literature. So what do you want? You've got this beautiful big pump here, and you want to get this pump pumping. And so that's what the purpose of endurance exercise is. And yes, they've had studies with primates on treadmills, and they show increased vascularity in the brain. And that's what you want. You want a very healthy vascular brain to feed the neurons in the brain. So these data are from the 2018 paper in JAMA Neurology. And what you can see here is over 6 months. This is a slightly different scale. This is the Movement Disorder Society, UPDRS. And here over 6 months, people get 4 points worse off. And if you do exercise with your heart rate up, you stay pretty much the same. And so you can actually Google the JAMA Neurology paper, and you'll see it's been cited a lot of times. It'll be my most cited paper, I think, by the time I retire. And it's simply because we're all looking for a way to slow down the rate at which our disease progresses. Now, I'm being recorded, so I will be very judicious in what I say next. I am a scientist, and therefore I believe in science. And the hallmark of science is that you do a study and somebody else does a study and they get the same finding. I talk to my students about this and the colleagues I work with. So one has to be able to replicate one's findings because replication gives one confidence that the finding is true. This is a busy slide, but I will walk you through it very, very carefully. This is my study. I call it SPARKS 2. And here is the group which exercised at 80 to 85%. And here's baseline in 6 months. They didn't change. So after 6 months, they're the same. This is the group which were a waitlist control. We didn't ask them to stop exercising. They did what they normally did. They got worse. For those of you who follow the YouTube and all the people who get on and talk, very famous neurologist, a good friend of mine, Dr. Bastian Bloom, and a group in Holland in 2019, first author was Van der Kolk, their findings were the same. Their people were more advanced in their disease. So my people were not taking medication very early on. These people were MDSU PDRS of 28 or so, and you'll see their disease progression was the same as my group. These lines have the same slope, identical. And the group which exercised at high intensity stayed flat. And then there was a third group from Dr. Mack in Hong Kong, and she did an exercise intervention with high intensity walking, but also balance activities and other activities as well. And people call that multimodal. So you exercise more than one system, more than one modality. And you'll notice her people had higher Parkinson's scores, so their disease was further on. And some of these people, they actually got better. Here, I'm just showing you exercise and you don't get any worse, slowing down the disease. They showed better. So the take-home message here is there are now 3 studies, America, Holland, Hong Kong, which show that if you keep your heart rate up for 30 minutes, 3-4 times a week, you have a good chance of holding the disease relatively constant for a while. Clearly, it's going to progress if you go many, many years, but you're slowing the rate of progression. And this evidence is really quite strong. The other thing is that there's 30 years of animal research, which also supplies very strong evidence that exercise is very good for the health of the part of the brain which is damaged. The part of the brain which is damaged is within the basal ganglia. So now let me give you a true story. Because one of the real privileges of my position is that I get to meet lots of wonderful people. And if I don't get to meet them, I get wonderful emails, and then eventually I run into them. So here's an email that I got. So this is from Javella Simmons. She gave me her permission to use her. And this is Javella here. Good morning. I just wanted to reach out and say thank you so much for this study. That's Sparks 2, the one I've just talked about. It has fueled me, empowered me, and encouraged me to fight Parkinson's disease like a warrior, hence warrior down here. While I don't qualify for your new study, I'm a testament to the positive effects of your research. In October 2015, at the age of 51, I was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease. I'm now 58. My medication, Azilect, Nupro, and exercise. I go to work out 5 days a week about reading your research in 2017. She's hit her 1500th class. Mission possible. Today was a major milestone for me. I remember day 1 vividly, June 19, 2015. I was tired, overweight, and stressed to the max. Thank you again to More Life. Well, you look at this picture. Looking pretty good to me. So I think, and the thing is that when I go around, and I was in Ohio last week and I was in Nashville the week before, person after person says the same thing. Of course, the real problem is I'm probably talking to people today who know this already, and I'm telling you nothing new. And the real challenge is to reach out into the community to people who really aren't as fortunate as being part of a group. Now, just in case we have somebody listening today who has just recently been diagnosed and has not started medication, I'm going to talk to you about SPARKS-3. Now, this is a phase 3 clinical trial. For those of you who don't know about how clinical trials work, phase 0 and phase 1 trials, especially when we're studying drugs, these are all about safety and tolerability. So before you get to phase 3, one needs to do lots and lots and lots of research. And as I'm sure you're all aware, following the COVID-19, when they work on their vaccination, the most important thing is that it does no harm. So you do many studies to make sure it does no harm. Then you go through phase 2, which I did. And here you have to show that it's really feasible. In other words, if you ask people to work out 4 days a week for 30 minutes at a high heart rate, will they do it? And we showed for sure people will do it. And then when you go to phase 3, the goal here is to show that one dose is superior to the other dose. And we have 370 people as our target goal. At the moment, we have 130 people with Parkinson's disease exercising throughout America, one site in Canada. It's physician self-referral. We then have screening with a pre-screen, a screening visit 1. We have a dopamine transport scan. We randomize 185 to each treatment arm. The 2 treatments are 80 to 85%, 60 to 65%. We have blinded assessments and we have a final assessment. And then the intervention is 18 months, 4 days per week at your target heart rate to whichever group you're assigned. And we measure your heart rate max. We have labs which measure the heart rate max. And we also measure your ability to consume oxygen. And then we have these nice little screen devices to help make sure that you are exercising in your target heart range. There is a wonderful site. My guess is at least one person in the audience I'm talking to has been down to University of California, San Francisco. It's a marvelous medical center. They are a site for SPARKS-3. Or if you meet somebody who's newly diagnosed, we're certainly looking for more participants. Now, I've given you a very strong exercise push, and I know why I've done it, and I know that it doesn't work for everybody. So I want to be really clear that all forms of activity are very good for you and much better than doing nothing. And I'm not speaking out of both sides of my mouth here, okay? So one side of my mouth is clearly telling you that if you follow the exercise prescription, you are doing the best thing you can from a physiological, neuroscience, biological point of view. But not everybody can do that. You know, just like, you know, a diet should perhaps be X number of calories broken down this way, not everybody can follow that religiously. And so at the end of the day, you have to find what works for you. Cycling through the redwoods is great. I took my daughter to a soccer camp at Stanford, and I stayed with her in the redwoods fairly close by, and we went running through the redwoods every day. This wasn't hard. Certainly a lot easier than running in Chicago in January outside. Cycling in California, just stay off 101, okay? There are parts of the roads which are just not safe, but it's wonderful. And if you look at the Dutch are generally really quite healthy. I love aqua aerobics. You go out into many, many health clubs. The big advantage of aqua aerobics is that it provides a lot of buoyancy, a lot of support. So if you have arthritis, if you have knee pains, unfortunately, Parkinson's disease does not preclude you from comorbidities. So if you have other comorbidities, aqua aerobics is very good. Move Big is very good. The principle here is the standard classic picture of Parkinson's disease is of somebody with restricted movement. And so you're trying to make everything big. Dancing is terrific, and rock steady boxing is very, very popular. And the thing to notice here about dancing and rock steady boxing, there is a huge social part to it. This is one of my all-time favorite pictures. It actually is my favorite picture because you've got a group of people who are empowered. They've decided that, yes, I have Parkinson's disease. I read on Twitter, somebody referred to Parkinson's disease as a companion. It's just with him, but it doesn't run his life. And so you have people here who just are out having a good fun with their friends and carrying on with life. Postural stability training is very important. I very much like Tai Chi. For many of you, the kind of slower movements, the mind, body, the work on balance, can be very, very cathartic. So what is the exercise prescription? It's clear. Weight training, like that very clever squirrel, endurance training, balance training. And so what is the prescription? To help your Parkinson's disease, take 1 aspirin every day, take it out for a run on your treadmill, out into the redwoods, out over to the Pacific Ocean, then take it to the gym, then to the Tai Chi class, and finish off with a magnificent bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon. I won't mention which particular vineyard, but Alexander Valley has more than one. Now, the Parkinson Foundation has done a lot of work to try to standardize and certify people. And I work very closely with them. And this is a kind of a document that are made available to trainers who can help give people the right aerobic endurance, straining, balance, agility, multitasking, and flexibility. You can go online and you can find this from the Parkinson Foundation, who are quite terrific. And then this version has been made more easy to digest. And so these are the exercise recommendations. So the aerobic, it can be on a treadmill, it can be on elliptical, it can be outside. If you have a nice house in Southern California, you can run outside around your house, your garden, like Lou does. And strength training, balance, agility, and stretching is always good. All the people I talk to on my Zoom call, which I have monthly, do like to stretch in the morning. Now, the question is, this is the hard question, how to get people to exercise. Well, you can go to physical therapy and get a prescription and a tune-up. So if you're freezing, if you're falling, if you are having trouble turning around, festinating is where you have slow shuffling steps. Sometimes you just need to see a therapist who can give you a tune-up and some cognitive strategies to help. Personal trainers are terrific. They are expensive. Sometimes, of course, if 3 or 4 people have a personal trainer, you divide the cost by 4, and so it becomes more manageable. Group training is great because you get to meet your friends, and that's why rock steady boxing is so good. It is good from a physiological, mechanical point of view. It's good from a social, psychological point of view. I've been involved in places where people in nursing homes or that they are seen at home by caregivers are quite frail. One can actually train caregivers to do some simple basic exercises. Just depends where one is on the spectrum. But as a support group, you will be reaching out to people. And if you find there are people who are relatively homebound, and you can then train their caregiver to do some exercise, it will be very good for them. And the results are clear. Dyad training, some people like to train in pairs. So you get on the treadmill with your good friend next door to you, and you can then both discuss the latest vintage coming out of the Alexander Valley. some of you, we're going to have at least one or two of you who are into heart rate monitors, into power meters, into everything else. Zwift is a program. I've got a bike behind me. I get on my bike, I put on my heart rate monitor, and then I go riding around London. Got this wonderful course. It's a kind of an exergame. And so I go over Tower Bridge, come down the embankment with all my friends, and I'm on a bike. Strava is a way you can, if you go for a walk through the redwoods, you can post on Strava. I just did my 3-mile walk through the redwoods. Twitchy woman is actually Sharon. She's a terrific Parkinson advocate in Southern California. You can find her, Twitchy Woman. She has speakers. Her groups are for women only. There is a place for women-only groups. I think sometimes certain conversations are just easier, and it's good to know about it. And Facebook has lots of opportunities for groups to meet. And I like this one here. To love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. I'm quite sure with all the science available now, if Oscar Wilde had Parkinson's, he would probably come to realize he needs to retire his quote. I have the privilege of Zooming, and I think some of my friends are on today from the Northwestern Zoom Club. So here you can, I was sent this last Thanksgiving, and these are 3 people. As you can see, one is quite a fearsome boxer. Another one, they love their horses and gardening. And here we are out in the mountains. Just live life just like normal. Now, who to listen to? So I've given you kind of 2 different messages. One is to straight science. This is what you should do. The other is to say, we're all human and we need to find what we're willing to do. So I gave a talk to Australia, and I got this wonderful email back from David Blacker, who's a neurologist with Parkinson's disease. I'll be seeing him in Barcelona. For those of you who don't know about the 6th World Congress, it's a wonderful event, and it is for people with the disease. There's scientific presentations, there are also workshops, there are roundtable discussions. You sit in groups of 10 with scientists, and you can learn much more about the disease. It's getting very late to go this year, because most of us have got our July plans, but he will be there. I will meet him. And I started my talk to Australia pushing the most important thing is to do what you like. And she said, and he wrote, while superficially I agree with the enthusiasm behind comments like exercise is medicine, do exercise you like, any amount of exercise good, I have a concern that this devalues exercise as an intervention and is akin to me saying to a patient, take whichever one of these medicines you like, maybe 50 mg, 200 mg, 4 times a day. Now, I had a meeting 2 days ago. If you want to hear more of my voice, I'm not suggesting it's a good thing, but if you happen to want to, on May the 18th, I'm part of a panel with Michael J. Fox. And I brought this up as something to discuss. And a lady with Parkinson's disease, who is a very avid exerciser and very articulate, bought into this line of thinking wholeheartedly. So if you're still a little bit skeptical, listen in to the Michael J. Fox, I think it's a podcast on the 18th, and you'll find a very articulate, very healthy person with Parkinson's disease arguing for doing as close as one is able to oneself to what is given to one by the science. If we have any people here who are really serious about understanding the very subtle ins and outs of advanced exercise, or any trainers, this book is very good. I wrote large parts of chapter 11. It's just been published. It's all chapter 11 There's a section on Parkinson's disease for anybody who's a trainer. What I've told you is entirely consistent with CDC recommendations. So this is good for everybody. So if we have partners, caregivers, anybody who does not have the disease, everything I've said is great for you. And I do notice, by the way, Tess, are you there, Tess? I don't see Tess. Well, Tess, if you can bring your dog on the screen, because I'm going to introduce your dog to a friend. I always show this slide because I'm pretty convinced that if you hate all of my talk, which is very reasonable, it's really hard not to love the last slide. And I'm sure, Tess, you and your hound will love the last slide. So thank you very much for your attention.